I want to talk about a game I played called Backshot Roulette. Buckshot Roulette. This was a game that Kat showed me because she saw some like streamers and YouTubers playing it. Buckshot Roulette is a free game that you can play on itch.io. There is a paid version, which I think is probably expanded in some ways. I think there's a version of it on Steam. It's like an update. But I played like the original basic version, so that's what I'm going to comment on that you can find on the website. So what is Buckshot Roulette? It is a very simple game of risk-reward management. The premise is it's got this neat art style of that kind of like limited, what would you call it? Not quite like 2-bit color palette, but that kind of like crunchy, I guess I would call it like a very limited, like crunchy, limited color palette, dark, dingy kind of art style. The whole premise is you're in some like weird nightclub. You walk through a door and into the dealer's room, and you are going to play shotgun roulette with him. with twists to make it anything more than just a zero-sum game. Anything more than just a simple die or don't die. So there's a shotgun on the table. You always get the first decision. You can shoot either yourself or shoot at the dealer. You have, I believe, about 5 hit points before you lose, and then you just restart. And then there are 3 rounds that you play through. You have to win 3 rounds in a row to beat the game. So it's a neat game. And I did a lot of thinking about it because there's a couple different aspects to it. There is a gameplay aspect, and then there's kind of like an aesthetic, maybe perhaps thematic way of looking at it. So first of all, gameplay wise, this is a fun game to kind of figure out and crack. And it definitely has limits. It definitely has ways that you can, like, I think by the end I had really figured it out. And I don't know how much of that was like intended to be there, or if you could even call that a flaw or whatever. But I think there are maybe some like areas of improvement to iterate on the concept. Maybe the expansions do that. I don't know. So the first thing, so basically the way that it works, I feel like I started explaining this and then got off topic. The shotgun's on the table. You always get to choose whether or not you shoot at the dealer or yourself. At the start of each turn, or I get not really turn, excuse me, essentially, when it starts, you get to see how many live rounds and how many blank rounds there are. Could be 1 live, 1 blank, 3 live, 2 blanks, whatever. Up to 8 total. And then they are loaded into the shotgun in a random order. And then you get to decide, do I shoot the dealer or shoot it myself? So obviously the initial game here is just, it's just playing risk management. You're just playing statistics. So if it's a 50-50 shot, so if there's 1 live and 1 blank, you kind of go through the thought process and you're like, okay, if I shoot myself, like what are the possible outcomes here? If I, of me shooting myself versus shooting at the dealer, if it's a live or a blank. And what I realized kind of like just over the course of playing it and figuring it out is that there's no, and I might call this a flaw with it. There's never any reason to ever point the gun at yourself. That's a quotable. Put that in your yearbook photo, in your yearbook quote. There's never any reason to point the gun at yourself. But really there isn't. You have nothing to gain from shooting at yourself, and only things to gain, or potentially things to gain. You do have things to gain, not only, but you do have things to gain from shooting at the dealer. Because, okay, let's think about this. Let's say that there's a live round and a blank round. If I choose to shoot it myself, what are the possible outcomes? If it's a live round, I get shot and I lose a hit point. If it's a blank round, then I pass the shotgun to the dealer next after my turn is done, and he just shoots me, right? Like there's no question about it. If I shoot at the dealer and it's a blank round, he's going to shoot me anyway the next turn, because again, I'm just going to pass it to him and he's going to get the live round to shoot at me. But if it's the live round and I shoot it at him, then I get the damage. I deal the damage to him. And that is kind of like, even if you start to mess with the odds, let's say there's 3 live rounds and 2 blanks. Let's say I have no idea and no way to figure out which one is in the chamber. It's just pure statistics. It is always the best decision to shoot the dealer. If there's more blanks than live rounds, it's always the best decision to shoot the dealer. You gain nothing from pointing the gun at yourself, which kind of takes away... It's weird because you're given the choice, but once you realize the actual, like, the way the game works and the way that the mechanics, the fact that you have multiple hit points, the way that all that stuff interacts, it simplifies the decision-making process down to a level that I would say is a little disappointing, if not for the fact that it throws a twist in there. The major twist of the game is the items. So the first round, there's no items. It's just playing pure odds. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But again, you always have that 1 in 4. You can think of it as always having a 1 in 4 chance of winning the turn, dealing damage to him if you just shoot at the dealer. The second round is where they introduce the items. So there's a couple different items. They can do things like skip the opponent's turn. They can do things like you'll rack the shotgun, which ejects the current shell, which gives you information on what was loaded in there, and now what's the likelihood that it lets you kind of like take a shell out of the possibility pool to kind of like weigh your odds. There's an item that restores health, which is very, very simple. Although I guess you could consider that like a risk reduction, because it means that you can take more hits. And then there's one that will just straight up look at the currently loaded shell. And then is there another one? Oh, and there's one that will double the amount of damage you do with the next shot, assuming that it's a live round. So in the second round, you get 2 items every turn. You get 2 items every turn. You can hold a maximum of 8. So essentially now the game becomes, how do you manage... The first round is like there to teach you about the risk reward management or how to like interpret it, like how to analyze it. The second round is about manipulating it. And that's where the game starts to get a lot more challenging, because there's a lot of branching possibilities with which items you use and how they might affect the odds of you getting the live round and shooting the dealer. You also have to factor in that he also has his own items, and if you don't plan around that, he can pull off some dastardly combos against you. So you have to think in like short term and long term, and in regards to what your opponent's able to do. And it's interesting. And then once you get to the third round, you start getting like 4 items per turn. And honestly, I feel like I think I got through the third round. I think I died the most on the second round. I don't think I died a single time on the third round. I don't think I had to restart a single time. I just breezed through it because the items, you get so many items, you kind of just have to use them. Otherwise, you're going to like max out. So you should just like dump all of your items every single turn. And like, it is not fair. Like you can practically guarantee with just most, because there's not that many items. Most of the items are useful in most situations. The handsaw, which is the doubles your damage, and then the cigarettes, which heal you, are slightly, I guess, kind of situational. Although there's no reason not to heal yourself whenever you have it. Most of them are like useful in all scenarios, And you can just like stack these dastardly combos with the items that just make it brutally unfair for the dealer. And I just like breezed through that part of the game. Like, it was really easy. Apparently, Kat told me that she watched a lot of people have trouble with it. I beat the game in like under an hour. It took me like 30-40 minutes. I realized that I might have a bit of a leg up on the competition here, because remember what I said this game was about, you know, like the core skill of it. I have played a lot of, remember that I've also played a lot of card games and fighting games. And if there's one thing I can say both of those genres have in common, it is risk-reward management. Like, they are all about that in different ways. And so, you know, like, I've done math before on like Yu-Gi-Oh decks and how likely it is to get a certain hand, or how likely it is to get a certain card based off of like how many cards are in the deck, and like what, like I've done stuff like that before. So doing that in my head for this like game of roulette wasn't too much of a stretch. I think I got into it pretty easily. I wrapped my head around it pretty quickly. If I had to make any suggestion to make the game more interesting, I'd say, like, I think I would like some kind of mechanic or thing in there to actually give you a reason to shoot it yourself. Like, what if you shoot it yourself and it's a blank? Like, maybe something could happen. You get to, like, I don't know. The most basic ideas would be something like, oh, you get a hit point back, or you get another item, or you get to like maybe you get to like exchange one of your items for another one, like you get to reshuffle it. I don't know, something like that. The game has a fairly limited number of systems, and it's a very tight, focused game, but I think there is room for a little bit of fleshing out to give some more interesting, like create some more interesting decision making, because it would be neat to have a situation where I go, okay, you know, I can shoot at him, and I can shoot at the dealer, and if it's a live round, you know, that's good. That's good for me. I'll do the damage to him. But if it's a blank, oh, I could have shot it myself and gotten another item or something. You know, I could have some kind of actual reason for you to want to do that. Just to, like, I don't know, to add something interesting back into the mix, making interesting decisions at as many points as possible. Especially, I think that's important, especially in a game as small as this, like a very, very small scale game. I will say, so on the thematic end, I was trying to think about what the game was going for, and I thought there was this funny moment when we were playing it where I died, and once you die, you just respawn back at the in like the first room. You just walk out back into the dealer's room, but there's like a mandatory period of just waiting, of like the game loading, and then before you can actually click on the door to go through it. And I was like, just let me through it. Just like, come on, let me in, because I was so into it at that point that I just wanted to like get to the next, get back into it. Now, thankfully, you don't have to restart from the first round if you die. You'll start back at the round that you died on, so that you don't lose that progress. I think that would be frustrating, because at the end of the day, it is like a 1 in 4 coin flip of success kind of thing. But what was I saying? Right. I just had this thing like, come on, let me get back in. Let me play the odds again. And I kind of stopped myself, and I was like, is this what a gambling addiction is like? And I thought about it, and I think that might actually be what the game is going for. Because if you think about, like, Russian roulette it's like the most extreme form of gambling you could possibly have. I mean, you can argue whether or not your own, like, betting your own life is, I guess you could be betting with someone else's life, or or other things that are worth a lot. Not even like monetarily, but just like extremely valuable. But it's like a great, like on an individual level, it is the highest stakes gambling you could possibly be doing. Like, you're gonna die. You're gambling with your own life. And in a setting where it's just a video game, you know, how real are those consequences? How legitimate are they? You're kind of taking this thing that in real life is like scary and like really intense, and you're putting it on the same level as like doing a slot machine or a crane game or something like that, you know, just a game of chance with a little bit of skill, with just with like a pinch of skill and decision making behind it. And like, what does that say? What does that mean? What does the dealer mean? Because the dealer is like, I think I described it as like, he looks like if Vivzy Pop drew the moon from Majora's Mask. Just this weird round face with these sharp teeth and black eyes, and like the is it supposed to represent something? I don't know. Nothing immediately connected with me, but I was wondering about that kind of like that perspective. Is the waiting period like, is that intentional? Like, is that in there? Because it does create this reaction of like, oh my God, let me get back in there. Let me gamble again. Let me gamble again. But now you're gambling with your life. And like, does gambling with your life, does gambling and the need to win, the need to because all you do at the end is you just win money. Does that end up trivializing the risk? Like, it's very intense. Like, you could be dying, right? And I think in that last round, I think the idea is that like you die for real. I don't know. I didn't lose. It's too easy. But you have you get this kind of response where like you win money at the risk of like your life, the very immediate risk of dying, and like it like is that at all worth it? Is that equivalent? Does it like trivialize that? I don't know. But it's, you know, it's some food for thought, and it's an interesting game. So I would recommend checking it out. Buckshot Roulette. It's free on itch.io. It's also got a paid version, which I imagine has some extra content. So I would totally recommend checking it out, especially if you're interested in like game design, because it is such a tight, focused, concentrated game on this one kind of skill set. And I'd recommend it. I'd recommend looking it up.